Okay, so today I thought I'd go over like actually not why but how I became vegan and antinatalist. And there might be a bit of background noise because I'm on the seafront at a place in Norfolk. But I just happened to be coming here, and I actually thought it would be quite fitting to do the video from here because basically the stories of how I became vegan and antinatalist kind of intertwine. And I was thinking about like what is the point at which there was like the most significant moment for it to start from. And I think it was back in 2016 or 2015, 2016. I was in my second year of university, and right at the beginning of the year, my grandfather got diagnosed with cancer. And I'm actually in the town that he used to live in, and he died here and was cremated here. And when he was diagnosed with cancer, I took it like really badly, like handled it really badly. And I like had a really like shit time at my second year of university, and I was kind of thinking, like, considering dropping out of university. Um, and then I thought maybe a better way to like go forward would be to do what's called like a year abroad. So like in addition to your main like study, you do like 1 year in another country, and yeah, you basically just study there for a bit. So I thought I'd do that. I chose Sweden because it's near the UK. It's easy to get back from. Just in case anything like happens with him, he takes a turn for the worst. But he actually ended up dying before I went anyway. So he died, and I went off to Sweden, maybe like a month apart. And when I got to Sweden, I moved into an apartment with I think about 12 other people. It was a big apartment, and there was a girl who lived there who I was living with, who she had a dog. And growing up, I'd never like had any companion animals or anything like that. So, and also I'm allergic to like cat and dog hair, like a dweeb. So I was like kind of frustrated that there was a dog there, and I was going to be living with a dog. I kind of found that annoying, and so yeah, I was just a bit resistant to it, a bit like annoyed. And but over time, like, I became kind of used to it, and actually it worked out so that this girl, her lectures and my lectures actually sort of like synced up, so that when I was at a lecture she wasn't, and when she was at a lecture I was. So I actually ended up like dog sitting a lot, and I kind of got to know this dog who was called Ema. And yeah, I got to know him as an individual. He was kind of the first animal that I'd ever like really got to know, and I began to quite like him. So I began to spend more time with him, and then it was the first time that that I was in the kitchen cooking meat, and he comes in, and he'd been in the kitchen like with me loads of times before, but this was the first time that he'd come into the kitchen while I'd been cooking meat. And for some reason, just something like clicked in my mind. And well, I was like cooking the meatballs, and he comes over, and I bend down to play with him, and then I get back up to like stir the meatballs again. And as I'm coming back up, something just clicked in my mind, and I'm like, oh fuck. Like for some reason I just realised that those like meatballs used to be an animal, like a pig, and like I've just got to know this animal, this dog here, and I was like, oh shit, that's fucked up. So I guess it was sort of like an emotional connection. And then I spent that evening, like, I moved all my animal products that I had. Like, I was a big meat eater, so I just gave it all away. Went to the supermarket, bought like a fully vegan shop, like like shopping cart, and yeah, spent that evening. I was supposed to be doing an essay, but I spent that evening instead I watched Gary Yourofsky's speech, I watched Earthlings, and I watched 101 Reasons to Go Vegan back to back, which fucked me up. Yeah, my mind was blown, because I'd had this emotional connection. I was like, fuck, I don't want to do that. Like, that's fucked up. But I hadn't heard the arguments. I didn't know, do other people fully feel like this? And I must have just searched online like animal rights or something vague like that, and these things blew my mind. I then sort of got to know the actual philosophy behind it, and I was fully convinced, and I was vegan from that day forward. So it was bang, 1 second to the next, I was like, oh, that's fucked up. And I spent about a month watching YouTube and stuff, vegan YouTube. I can't really remember exactly what videos, but it was probably Earthling Ed, people like that, learning the arguments, stuff like that. And then I searched for activism, and I was in Uppsala at the time, which is just north of Stockholm. I think it's the 4th biggest city in Sweden, which doesn't mean it's very big, because Sweden isn't very big, in terms of population anyway. And yeah, I went down, I found this event, I messaged on it saying, look, I haven't been to any sort of activism before. Is anyone traveling to Stockholm from Uppsala? And this lady, she messaged on there, she commented back saying, yeah, I'm coming from Uppsala, you can travel with me. I was sick. And yeah, she was really nice. I was very shy and stuff. So we got to Stockholm, did a demo, organized by this woman called Michelle, part of a group called Mjölksanningen, which is Swedish for milk truth, or the truth of milk, exposing the dairy industry. So I just stood there, held my placard, I think it said, there's a picture of me from my first demo, I'll put it up, but I think it says milk farmers have blood on their hands in Swedish or something like that. And I did this demo, got to talk to some of the activists. I didn't really talk that much because I was a bit nervous and shy. And then, yeah, I did that, went to a few more demos, and then I think only a couple months later, I was at a demo, and we just finished, and we were walking in Stockholm, there is a fully vegan supermarket, and as you can guess, it's very expensive. All of Sweden's expensive, to be honest. But anyway, we were on our way there, and I'm walking alongside the organizer at the time, talking to him just about random shit, and then I overhear some guy speaking to this girl, and the girl says something, and he sort of laughs, and then says, oh yeah, ha ha ha, because having kids is wrong, or something like that. It might not be those exact words, but it was something like that. And I turned to the organizer who I was talking to just then, and I was like, why would he say that? I've never heard anyone say something like that before, saying that having kids is wrong. Why? I don't understand, why would he say that? Because at the time, I was big natalist, I wanted 3 kids. If someone asked me, what do you want to do with your life, I would say, I don't really mind if I don't have a good job, I just want to have kids. Yeah, I was big into it, like most people are. And yeah, and I just never come across this view anymore. So, at all, sorry. So I asked him yeah, what does that guy mean? And he kind of was a bit, I don't know if dismissive is too strong a word, but he basically just said that guy's, he's just an antinatalist, just, you just ignore him. And then he moved the conversation on, and I never got to actually speak to the guy that day anyway. I'd spoken to him before, I knew the guy, but I'd only spoken to him about veganism, and yeah, I never got to speak to him, but I knew the word now, right? And I knew that view existed. And then about maybe a month or so later, I was in London. I'd gone back home, and I was just visiting, and I did a cube, with AV, Anonymous for the Voiceless. I did a cube of truth in Leicester Square, and afterwards I was speaking to, from my memory, 2 activists, my friend Brad, and an activist called Michael Green, who's sadly passed away since. And then also one of the other organizers at the time, Brad was one of the organizers, the other organizer, George Martin, I can't remember him being directly in the conversation, but my memory may be hazy. But since he said that he probably did bring it up, because he's always the one that brings it up, so I will just like defer to his better judgment there. But he was definitely present anyway. Like I can't remember exactly who was where, but anyway. So the topic, the conversation got onto the topic of antinatalism, and when it came up, I said to Brad and Michael, and maybe George as well, but I can't remember exactly who I was speaking to, and I said, like, yeah, I've heard, what is this term? I've heard this term before. It's about like having kids is wrong or something. I heard this guy mention it, and it kind of got shut down. What is this? And they basically just like explained it to me, and I chucked like my hat in the ring. I threw like a few pushbacks and stuff. Like I probably did the classic sort of like, what if you stub your toe bollocks. And they just replied to everything. I had no good argument. I couldn't think of anything good argument. And and then they said like, okay, cool. Well, you seem like you're kind of getting it, but here's a few podcasts or interviews to listen to. And off the top of my head, I think it was the David Benatar ones with Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, and there was a third one which I can't remember exactly who the guy's name is. But I'll link all three of them, or I'll pop them up on screen, because I remember which one it is. I just don't remember the name of the guy. And I listened to those, and I was just like, this guy seems very level-headed, very down to earth, very reasonable, very considered. And I was like, I got fucking nothing. So yeah, from that point on, I was like, yeah, fuck. Like, I really want to have kids, but just because I want something doesn't mean I can do something that I've been convinced is unethical. So, like, yeah, I was like, fuck it. I gotta, I'm antinatalist now. I gotta accept that. And yeah, and that was basically it. I mean, that was how I got to the point where I'm vegan and antinatalist. That's how I like came across the two like philosophies, or however you want to put it. With veganism, it was more like initially was an emotional like connection, and then I learned the arguments. With antinatalism, it's been the other way around. I was like reasoned into it, but like my emotions weren't very connected to it. But now it's been like, but now I am sort of like, I emotionally get why people want to do that. Like when I hear someone is going to bring a kid into the world, I'm like somewhat saddened by that. Whereas before I wasn't, it was just logical. But yeah, so that is the story. I hope you find that interesting. Let me know how you came to veganism and antinatalism in the comments. I look forward to like seeing how you guys did as well. And I'll see you in the next video.